morning, everyone. Hello, folks. We are back again. Yeah, I know we took a delayed of a week, but apologies. But we are back again with another session. This time we have another interesting session. One of the biggest announcement that occurred on reInvent 2024 about how AWS is going to shape the world by bringing data and AI together. And I have one of the best person to talk about that from AWS. That what is that service looks like and what's around the new thing that's going to come about. This is going to be a very interesting session, and trust me, this is going to be a new service. I would not This is a new service with some old concepts and some new way of doing the things, so please be patient, stay tuned. And with that, let me talk about today's speaker. So today's speaker is none other than Ravi Kumpala. He is an analytics specialist at AWS India, and he's going to one who's going to help us to talk about how exactly AWS has launched called a SageMaker Unified Studio, and how they are trying to build both the best of the world of data and AI, which is what we talk about a lot nowadays with thanks to Mr. Generative AI concepts. So we'll have Ravi today to talk about that. Hey Ravi, good morning. How are you doing today?
Morning, good morning. Thank you so much for having me here. And yeah, I'm doing great and looking forward to doing this webinar.
Absolutely. So let me, without wasting much time, let me bring Ravi's screen on the stage. And again, please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate. Put it in the chat section. We'll have Ravi answer all of the question. And in case if you're watching this video in an on-demand mode, don't worry. We'll have this entire video streamed, saved on YouTube, so you can watch at your ease. And you can put all the comments on the comment section of the video, and Ravi and I'll answer that once the session is done. So feel free, go ahead and get the best of it. With that, I'll pass on to Ravi. Ravi, the screen is up. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sanchit. So I'm good to go. Okay, I'll take that as yes.
Yes.
Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for joining on a Saturday morning. I know a weekend can be a little difficult, but it's really amazing to see your commitment and getting onto this webinar. So what we'll talk today is about the new SageMaker. I'm sure a lot of you would have heard about what's the new SageMaker is, and at least some of you would have already worked on SageMaker. We'll just take off on what this SageMaker has got to offer. And towards the end, I'm okay to take questions, and we'll just wait till the end. And meanwhile, you can keep putting your questions on the chat. All right. So why new SageMaker? So already we are doing quite good. The SageMaker that most of you would have already known is quite it's the entire IDE for your model management. But what's actually happening? So as we see, there's a lot of the three major levers that has encouraged us to go to the next SageMaker. The next we thought that the way it is currently needs to be kind of upgraded. It needs to go to the next phase. Okay, so first is technology. You all know that Gen AI and agentic has become the norm. I don't know how many of, in fact, the last 6 months I haven't heard many customers talk about the traditional AI. I haven't heard anyone talking about. I have this data science team who is building some statistical models. I don't know, those conversations are long gone. So but I'm hoping it's not permanent. I hope the good old statistical engineers and data scientists will come back, and the traditional AI will be leveraged in addition to the generative AI and agentic AI. And then if you see from the people standpoint, you see a lot of line of business folks have gotten into Gen AI has been democratized across, so basically what it has done is that organizations have been struggling to make data as a core decision making lever for many enterprises, for the non-functional groups. But what Gen AI and agentic are doing is that they're kind of bridging that gap. So data is no more complex. Data is very simple. All you need to know is a natural language, and you can do all kind of analytics. So people are getting, more different kind of personas are getting adopting this. And of course, the organizations are changing. Organizations, just like what I said, they are no more limiting data to one division or one specific use case. They're kind of expanding it across end to end. So this actually needs, a different kind of an AI, where the organizations will be able to provide new experiences, to their end customers or their stakeholders. So conversational interfaces has become a norm. You just have to ask a question and you would get a response. And boosting productivity is another big area. Where AI is changing the way we work. Uh, Developers is just the tip of the iceberg, but I'm seeing from the productivity standpoint, even how plant managers on manufacturing plants, their productivity is getting improved or boosted through AI. So it's not just from the developer standpoint, but it's also across various functions in the organization. And delivering insights, yes, so it's no more what people are doing. It's also about why they are doing what they are doing. So organizations have become more intelligent these days, and that is also possible through infusing a lot of creativity. So when we look at the various all these new the way AI is changing, there's a lot that happens in the backend, right? You all know that there's a lot that happens in the backend. So what we are trying to say is that a generative AI application may look very fancy on the top of it, but then if you want to make the generative AI application really give the results that you want, you need to look at the data foundations. Okay, so one classic example is that I was actually having a chat with one of the business leaders in one of large enterprise, and he said that Ravi, we have invested a lot on Gen AI initiatives. We got a lot of budget on that, but somehow the results are not really good. So I'm not really sure whether this technology works or not work. It doesn't so there is this huge doubt that is being raised by the decision makers and at the senior level, where they are not sure whether Gen AI is going to really stand up to the promise or not. And I peeled a few layers. I said, why? What is the problem you're facing? So obviously, he's talking about hallucination and things like that, where the results are not really up to the mark. The very immediately, I did not ask him about whether you have a data foundation, you have a data platform. I didn't ask any of those obvious questions. All I've asked him is that what is the catalog that you are using? What is the data catalog that you are using? Because end of the day, when you type an NL, I mean, in a typical Gen AI application, your NL is being converted into tokens, embeddings, and so on and so forth. And then they are going to find out which is the nearest word, and then build the response. And in the process, there is a lot of reference to the catalog. Okay, so I just asked them, boss, do you have a data catalog? What catalog do you use? And that's where there is a huge gap. They don't use any data catalog. So I'm like, boss, without using data catalog, how are you going to gather the metadata? The metadata is the one which is actually going to make your Gen AI successful. So this is one example that I'm giving, but there are so many such examples. That means, bottom line, what I'm trying to say is that the under the iceberg is what you need to really pay an attention. Okay, we are paying attention, but we have problems. So what are the problems? So when we look at under the iceberg, we are looking at four broad areas that all the engineering goes into, right? First is all the big data processing, and then you have all the SQL analytics. You have this data warehouse, and you have ad hoc analytics and all of that. Then you have a bit of machine learning, building your models, and so on and so forth. And you do generative AI. Wait a second. Sorry. How did my... Okay, good. I think I played with it a bit. Okay. So Yeah. So now the problem is there's a problem and there is also an observation. The problem is that, more than problem, I'll say observation. The observation is that there is going to be quite a bit of an overlap, between each one of these functions. You see the same individual, doing a big data processing and SQL analytics. You see data engineer and data scientist roles are being kind of merged. The line is very blurry between them. Data scientist and analyst roles are being merged. So this kind of thing is happening, and generative AI application developers are, also, business analysts. There, some of them are also line of business folks. So with all this overlap happening between various functions that one would do it in the data foundation, what is really needed is a very strong collaboration between these four areas. You need a very strong, collaboration, and the experience has to be unified. Which means, okay. If you are using a data warehouse and you are using some kind of ad hoc query tool, let's say like Trino. Okay, today what's happening is that you open an editor in Trino or Athena, and then you fire few queries over there, and you want to do something on Redshift, which is a data warehouse. You open a query editor over there, and then you do some work. So there is, multiple tools are being used across the data lifecycle. Okay, so how would it be if you are just using one editor irrespective of what the compute engine behind is? Okay, that's number one. What about you are just using one notebook irrespective of what platform you are using behind? You may be using your EMR Studio or Glue job, or you're doing something on SageMaker. Irrespective of all these things, imagine if you just have one notebook interface, or if you just have only one IDE to build your applications in generative AI. So that's where that's where the new SageMaker comes into play, where the new SageMaker has got three layers: Unified Studio, data and AI governance, and Lakehouse. We'll go about each one of these, one by one. So when we talk about Unified Studio, we are basically talking about, unifying the developer experience. So basically, the new SageMaker AI, brings unification across three layers. One is at the developer, unifying the developer experience. Okay. Second is unifying the data governance. Okay, that means today what's happening is that in your data architecture, every component that you use, you have to give data governance. You have to apply data governance in each one of these. Yes, there is lake formation through which you can actually give a unified, unified governance. But tying it up with the catalog, which will be accessed by the line of business folks, all of that is not yet possible. Okay, which is what the new SageMaker catalog will address. And then the unifying the data lake, which is sitting on your S3, and your data warehouse, which is on your Redshift, through something called a SageMaker Lakehouse. So we are doing, so in a sense, you can look at, if I have to give a very non-technical answer to what is the new SageMaker, the new SageMaker is analytics in a box. So we have heard our customers giving us a lot of feedback saying that, hey, every time we come to AWS, you have a plethora of services. You just open up your architecture, it kind of intimidates us because you have so many services there. So with SageMaker Unified Studio, all of that is wrapped into one layer, which is the new SageMaker. So we'll go one by one in each of these. So, Unified Studio, like I said, you have streaming. So today, out of the box is data processing, your SQL analytics, model development, Gen AI application development, all of that you can do it through Unified Studio. Okay, so unfortunately, I did not plan a demo today, but I'll share with you some screens, etc. But we will be doing in this series. We also have a comprehensive demo of SageMaker Unified Studio, which basically, is only on the console, no PPTs. Okay, so what we are also getting in Unified Studio is streaming. That means, your MSK, all of them will be, MSK, Kinesis, etc. will be included in under the streaming side of it, and your quick site will be integrated. That means you can actually create visualization, dashboards in the Unified Studio using Q. Okay, and your open search also will be integrated. That means everything that you are talking about, from streaming to batch ingestion to data processing, SQL analytics, model development, visualizing in a quick site, your search and observability, all of that from one UI, and that UI is out of console experience. You don't have to get into any of the consoles to get that. I'll share with you some screens to basically understand how it looks like. Okay, so the purpose of this is to provide seamless access to all data and all resources and all tools. So like I mentioned, we are talking about basically the idea is that all the users who are part of SageMaker, who are accessing SageMaker Unified Studio, will have access to the data, the code, the models, and the compute. When I say compute, I'm talking about be it EMR, be it Glue, be it Athena, be it Redshift. All these fall under typically compute. Okay, the query engines. Okay, so they'll have access to all the models that are already there. Okay, through your and by the way, this is also Git integrated, so you don't have to worry about building the entire integration pipelines again. So you can just use that. So, I'll just show you some, like I said, a few screens, which will give you some idea on how it's going to look like. Okay, so all you do is that, you don't have to memorize, various, the URLs of all the various components that you use. You just would be given one global URL, and that URL, you can actually log in with your, identity management solution. And this can be integrated with your Active Directory, so on and so forth. Okay, so once you log in, and by the way, you're not this is just a login into your UI, and this is not logging into the any of the console. Okay, so once you log in, you will be able to oops okay. Once you log in, okay, you'll be able to discover, build, and govern. So that means, so basically, even before I get to this screen, there are basically two types of logins, like in any other tool. One is a admin login and one is a user login. Okay, so admin login is the one who actually creates artifacts and keeps them, and the data governance, and all of those will be done by the admin. Admin is the one who actually decides which project will have what access and what tools, etc. It's a one-time effort that the admin do. And then the users, the moment they log in, they get to a screen like this, where they can actually discover what artifacts that you want, like whether you want to have you can search for projects. Okay, so the concept of SageMaker Unified Studio is around something called as projects. So project is, I'll also give you an example. I think I'll also cover that in some of the slides next. But a project is nothing but a kind of a a kind of a group of data, uh, compute. Okay, it's got users, and it's got storage. Okay, okay. Well, when I say data, it is data. When I say storage, it is data set. So, what data sets can you access? What compute can you access? What governance do you have? To let me see. You can create an instance or not create an instance, or you can access a certain data set or not, etc. So it will have these three things. So now imagine project as, let's say, I'll give you one example of, if I'm doing a customer churn. Okay, I'll create a project by name customer churn, and there I will figure out who are the people who is going to use it. Let's say there are two data engineers, three data scientists, two data analysts who are going to work on customer churn project. I'll add them into the project customer churn, and they will inherit. Okay, individually, I'm using the word inherit. They will inherit everything that the project has. That means if the project has got ability to create clusters in Redshift, they will get that those rights to create clusters in Redshift. Okay, if the project has provided a bunch of data sets in S3, the users will be able to have access to those data sets. And project will have a bunch of code, just like how you store your code in your notebooks. You can just that code is also available in project, and these users will be able to play with that code and access that code, and do whatever they want. Now imagine a scenario where the same individual who wants to who is part of the customer churn project, and they want to access a let's say sales data set, but that sales data set is not there. They don't have access to that. Okay, but the sales data set is not part of the project customer churn. So what they can do is that in SageMaker catalog, they can basically search whether that particular data set is there or not. And if it is there, they can subscribe to that data set. Then what happens is that the owner of the data set will get a notification saying that so and so person is trying to subscribe to this particular data set, and do you want to approve or not approve. So now I can decide whether when you subscribe, you also give your justification, your role, so on and so forth. Now I may decide, okay, for this role, if the table is having 100 columns, I will say that well, not all the 100 columns should be needed for this particular individual. I don't mind giving the access to this particular individual the data set, but I don't want all the 100 columns. I can choose what columns that I want to give to this particular individual, and then click on approve. Okay, so then that particular individual will get the access to the data set. So all this is happening, okay, more on a self-service mode, without having to reach out to anyone and then ask or anything like that. Okay, so yeah, you can see I mean, since I was in a flow, I just went on talking about it, but you can see it in the screen here. How this is entire builder experience is centered around projects. You have project overview, you have all the see, this is a churn analysis project. You got different SQL notebooks, Python notebooks, so on and so forth. Okay, you have data, compute, members, so on and so forth, right? You have see here on the left hand side, you have subscription requests. What subscription requests have you made, and what happened to those subscriptions, whether are they approved or not. And entire SageMaker Unified Studio Q is also integrated, a generative AI, assisted experience, powered by Q. That means if you get stuck somewhere, let's say, this also includes, integrating this with the query editors, with the notebooks. So if you want to get a, the right SQL code, open the query editor, click on this purple icon, and you can just ask, can you create a SQL query to search for whatever, and then it generates the SQL query, and you can use that. So throughout the experience, as long as you are in this Unified Studio, you are given that generative AI assistance, and you have access support to all your all the tools, like the tools that are available. Like you see, there are IDE and applications, analysis and integration tools, so you can actually add any of these tools to any of the projects. So typically you would do it, when you are, if you're an admin, you can use all the tools that you need for data processing, for that particular project, or any SQL analytics or, Gen AI, you can actually add those tools for that particular project. These tools are also integrated with Git, like I just mentioned earlier. You don't have to set up the integrations and all those things. Okay, so these tools share, can connect to work with variety of AWS and third-party services. That means, tomorrow if you want to, let's say work with Salesforce, you can also integrate it with Salesforce and work. Okay, so that's one thing. Then unifying the query editors. If you see, let's say, let, okay. All right. So you can choose what query editor, what SQL engine that you want to leverage. You can either use Athena, like if you can notice on the left hand side, you see Athena or Redshift. You can choose which one you want, and you can uh, we are also having third party connectors to Snowflake and so on and so forth, where you can also add Snowflake over here and choose the query editor from that. So you don't have to you don't have to use different tools, to use a different query editor. You can just, one query editor, but the engine will be different behind. It can be Athena, it can be Redshift, it can be whatsoever, and then you can query your data lakes and data warehouses and so on and so forth. Likewise, with the Studio Notebook as well, the notebooks are also integrated. You can use a choice of the EMR or Glue or any other local engines. Let's say, you want to use Trino, you can use Trino, or you want to use some other third party tool which you are managing on your by yourself. You can use that as well. Okay, so you can configure in what kind of instance that you want, what kind of memory that you want. You can do all of that, provided you are given rights here, but then everything can be done from one UI. Okay, so that helps you, collaborate and build faster. The collaboration aspect will be is what is highlighted. You can prepare and integrate data with data processing. You can do SQL analytics, so on and so forth. So, that's on the Unified Studio part of it. Then we have SageMaker Catalog, which is where, we are kind of, the governance part comes into. So through SageMaker Catalog, the data governance is administered, for all your data sets, your models, generative AI applications, and compute. So now, when we talk about SageMaker, catalog, basically, there are two things that we do. So one is that how do we build the trust in the data, okay, and how do we protect the data? So when we're talking about the trust in the data, so one of the again, this is one of the examples that I want to give from my experience. I was talking to this CPG company, CPG FMCG company, where the head of data gave me a very depressing statement, saying that, here Ravi, we put very similar to the example that I gave in the earlier Gen AI scenario. He said that, here Ravi, we have all this data, you name it, we got all of it, yeah, but then somehow, we don't really see the decision making being done based on data. Okay, the line of business folks, they are, it's I'm talking about a very large and old FMCG company. So there's hey, these business guys are there here working for the last 24 years, and they would rather go with their gut and not with anything else, with any kind of dashboard and all these things. They just use at max, Excel sheet to know what is actually happening. That's all. So so basically the data driven decision making is not happening. So I peel the layers, like I always do. So I ask them, like, why is what is the reason why are they not making the decisions based on data? So I said that, hey, the one of the biggest reasons that is that they don't believe what the data is saying. So that's a very big and a very common problem, right? Most of us have seen that. Customers, typically non-IT, the traditional organizations, you see that, taking data-driven decisions is little hard. I think it's getting better now. It's getting a lot better now, but it's usually hard. So as we peel the layers, and we happened to talk, coincidentally, he called, one of the line of business folks, when I was, he just called him into the room. And I asked him, like, what is the, why you don't believe that? So they said that, see, the data that you are showing, is nowhere compared to what our experience says. So our experience is totally different to the data that you are showing. Then that's where, I asked him, okay, how will you believe this data? Okay, it is showing something different. Okay, it is showing for variety of reasons. But when will you believe this data? Then, or why you don't believe this data? So they said, I don't know who all are actually working on this data, and you suddenly ask us to do it. And if something fails, we are held responsible. So that is the reason why we don't want to trust this data. Then I said, okay, trust is a very big word. So if somebody very well, when I say very well, not the individual, but the role. If you know very well, who worked on this data, do you think that trust in the data will increase? Is it absolutely yes? Is it absolutely yes? Because today we don't know who is actually creating this data, who is actually working on this, etc. So that is exactly where the data quality, data lineage comes into play. Okay, that is exactly where you are actually making sure that the kind of transformations that happen in the data can be transparently shown to the line of business folks, and they can also tell why they have taken that kind of transformations, whether they are entitled to do those transformations or not, so on and so forth. So once you have a very rock solid data lineage and a data quality, system, the first thing that will happen is you will start trusting the data. And then there is other reason why they don't want to trust the data, or they don't want to use it, because the more they use it, the more they are putting things into it, and the more they are afraid whether it is really safe or not. I see this often with the finance CFO org, they have a very high stone-walled, or product teams, very stone-walled, setups, and it's very difficult for them to contribute anything because, or share the data because of the governance. So that's where, what SageMaker data and AI governance, SageMaker catalog does is that it addresses both protection of the data and building the trust. And while doing this, there is observability as well, in terms of usage and cost logging and monitoring. Okay, so that's the catalog part. And what we also noticed is that, today, most of you would have already worked in Glue Data Catalog. Glue Data Catalog actually has a prerequisite. One has to know SQL a bit. Otherwise, it's very difficult to know whether the data set is there or not. So if a line of business folk, somebody functional, supply chain manager, wants to work or do some analysis on inventory and want to check whether that data is there or not, today there's no way he can actually check. He needs to know a bit of SQL, and that they will show some tables. I don't know whether the table is what, so on and so forth, right? And whether, again, like, to trust it or not, right? So in SageMaker catalog, there are two things that will happen. Of course, one is, like, you all would have seen several lineage tools in the past. If not, you can actually see a pictorial representation of the transformation of the data from the time it is originated. And by the way, this data lineage is from the time it is there in the AWS ecosystem and originated from there. Okay, so many people ask me this question, if the transformations happen, before, it is moved into AWS ecosystem, can it still show? Okay, there is a little bit of technical activity that needs to be done. If it has been done, then no problem. Otherwise, the answer is no. Then the second part is that, building a business metadata. So in Glue Data Catalog, what we have done is that, using a generative AI feature, we kind of, expanded on what is the see if you see this. I'm just trying to show. It builds the business metadata. Okay, you can see what is the schema, what is the data quality. For data quality, there is some kind of scoring that you'll see, and you, as a business owner, you can decide whether, that data quality, that score is good enough for you to proceed with the data or not. You can see lineage, and you can see your subscriptions, and from there itself, you can choose on that data set whether you want to query with Athena or whatever you want to do. Okay, so here, it gives me a full detailed description of what that a data set does. So, the whole thing, like I said, it revolves around domains and projects. Typically when we talk about domain can be either a large enterprise, or I mean, an organization level domain. You can create one, or if you are talking, if there's a very big organization, you can create individual, domains. Like for e-commerce, one domain. For supply chain, there's one more domain. So typically, we are talking about like a mesh kind of a scenario here, data mesh kind of a scenario. So you have those domains, and within each domain, you have different projects, like how you see there's one for churn prediction, one for user analytics, so on and so forth. Okay, and you can map that, where you can actually map each of these projects to different business initiatives, and get all the different data workers, work on it. Okay, so again, this is a bit on, how to model your organization. When you create, your domain, you provide, this is more of a area where you can manage your accounts, users, networks, so on and so forth. You can start simply with a single account and associate different accounts to expand, or you can just create the URL here the way you want to have it. If you want to give a custom URL, you can create a custom URL. And there is a concept called blueprints here. We will talk about this little later. Blueprints is infrastructure as a code. So you don't have to again create, for, let's say you want to create another project, with the same set of data, so on and so forth. You can actually create a blueprint of that, and then you can deploy it. It's more like an infrastructure as a code. Okay, so we spoke about this, they simplify, development and collaboration. Okay, you can have multiple accounts in one project. It's not necessary that, one account, one. I mean, you can't have a project without multiple accounts. You can actually use that. Okay, yeah, I was talking about blueprints, which enables, response self-service. So basically, all the, basically it helps you create, resources as needed within project. It's more like a like an infrastructure as a code. Okay, you can create these blueprints and you can deploy so that it will be faster execution, faster building of your projects, and so on and so forth. Okay, so discovering the data, this also we kind of touched upon. What we have now is that you can find data as it is published. You can use business terms to search for the right data. You don't have to worry about this is basically does the NL to SQL. So you can search with NL and then it will convert into a SQL behind, and then search for data in ML assets, what data products we have, so on and so forth. Whatever you want is ideal for you, you can pick that up. This is just a small representation. I already spoke to you about this. So you have typically, in SageMaker catalog works is again, sits on top of Glue. So underneath is it basically, when you add Glue and a generative AI layer on top of it is your SageMaker catalog. But you also have data governance underneath that. So typically, what happens is that Glue crawlers crawl the metadata from all the various data sources and builds the data catalog. And if you want to discover data, you have to fire a query on this catalog, and then you would get the response. But with the SageMaker catalog, even it is accessible for business users. Okay, SageMaker lineage. I mean, the data lineage. API driven data lineage. In fact, this is. I mean, I can't commit now, but towards the end of the year in the reinvent, probably you'll see that data lineage also includes external data sources. So there's a lot of innovation that is happening over here on the data lineage part, because like we discussed before, data lineage is directly proportional to the trust in the data and adoption of the data and data-driven decision making. Okay, just spoke about this. We spoke about you can subscribe to data. So you can also customize what data you want to allow. You can create all of that. Okay, yeah, and we head towards the bottommost layer, which is the SageMaker Lakehouse. So there is one thing that I want to highlight in this. So many of you would have worked on Redshift, and you would have also had access to, I mean, worked on S3. So when Redshift was, one small, I can say flashback. So when Redshift was started, came out as a coupled architecture. That means your storage, your compute and storage are coupled. So when your query compilation, when you run a query, basically there is a query compilation and query execution. Query compilation, you need compute. Query execution, storage will be mostly used. So when it was doing compilation and it needed to be expanded, even the storage used to get charged, and when the execution time, even the compute used to get charged. So what we have done is that we decouple that. We decoupled that about 2.5-3 years ago, and then after decoupling, now they both are charged independently. After decoupling, what we have done is that all the storage we put it on S3 so that you can also optimize on the cost, and we call that as Redshift managed storage. But now a lot of customers came to us and said that, hey, the data that is sitting in Redshift managed storage in S3 is very fine, curated data, and we want to access that. How do we go about that? That's where that came up with this concept of a lakehouse, where we kind of, you will be able to use any compute engine and not only query the data that is sitting in S3, but you can also query the data that is sitting in Redshift managed storage through an Iceberg API. And for this, you don't have to come through Redshift. That means, you don't have to, so your cost is optimized because you're not coming through Redshift. And the data that is curated and sitting in RMS in Redshift is open through an Iceberg API. So that's where, we also came up with S3 tables. So again, one interesting fact is that when Netflix and Apple, invented Iceberg, they did it on S3. So it is all, so as Iceberg open table format is a very native to S3. And people who don't know what an open table format is, basically an open table format is all the tabular data that is sitting in a immutable data storage such as S3. You can actually put it in a tabular format so that you can make that into a transactional data lake. Okay, so today whatever you put it on a S3 as a data lake, it is immutable. That transactionality is not there in it. And this was originally started by Uber, when the drivers were constantly the routes were had to be updated. The data from the cabs used to come and get populated in S3. And to run any queries on the top of that, to come up with a better optimization of the driver availability, it was not possible. They had to actually move it to another data warehouse, and then there they had to do it. So that gave birth to Hoodie. Okay, so Uber has started Hoodie as an open table format. What they did is that, okay, we'll just put this, still it will be a immutable data, but then we will put it in a tabular format. So we will change the table, the header of the table pointing to the right JSON file in the Hoodie, or JSON or Parquet in Hoodie. So that way there is a transactionality that was brought in. This is a very big topic in itself. I would love to talk about an hour on this, but we don't have time. But maybe sometime later we will be doing that. So what S3 tables is, okay, for one, we have Delta Lake from Databricks, as an open table format. Iceberg, Netflix and Apple, largely Netflix, and Hoodie, which is by Uber. So this, Amazon, AWS supports all the three. You can have all the three in S3. Okay, but if with Iceberg, we came up with something called as S3 table. That means it is managed Iceberg. So what is the meaning of managed Iceberg? Because in an open table format, you would do a few things like deleting the orphan files, or compaction of the small files, or rewriting the manifest files. There are a bunch of admin work that you will be doing, which will be taken care by S3. And not just that, it is 10x faster in terms of requests per second, compared to traditional Iceberg, self-managed Iceberg on S3. So, why am I bringing this? Because this is part of the Lakehouse whole architecture that we have. So this screen is what is where we are currently at and heading towards. Okay, so, the one side of it is that all your third-party applications, your third-party compute, can access the Lakehouse data through an Iceberg REST API, um, uh, you know, uh, um, that interface. Then you have zero ETL, with all the various AWS databases. That means, 60% of any data engineer time spent on ETLs. So we kind of completely remove that layer by saying that, okay, fine, well, let's just publish a endpoint. Let's just show as an endpoint. So any OLTP you want to do, you will do it on, the databases that are over here. Okay, any OLAP that you want, you will be doing it in Redshift. So there is between the OLTP databases and Redshift, or S3 for that matter, there is zero ETL. Behind the scene, the ETL will be managed by AWS. Okay, so it's basically a CDC that happens from the source to destination. And not just that, we are also coming up with query federation. So already we are having this interfaces. We're coming with this interface with Salesforce, ServiceNow, so on and so forth. So moving forward, you will also be able to do the zero ETL integration or query federation. Query federation means, you can, when you fire a query on Redshift, for example, or using any of the tools, the data will be, you don't have to move the data wherever it is. For example, if your data is sitting in Salesforce, that data will be fetched by the query engine, and then give you the results instead of you moving that data from Salesforce onto your S3 or Redshift. So that is query federation. So there's a lot of innovation that is happening on zero ETL and query federation. So that is what is a comprehensive lakehouse that we are talking about when we talk about SageMaker Lakehouse. So and of course, lastly, GenAI application development. Bedrock is integrated. Bedrock is is an IDE that is integrated with SageMaker Unified Studio. When we talk about Bedrock, basically Bedrock gives that. Why Bedrock? Bedrock provides the catalog of LLMs, for you to build your models. Because whenever you're building any of the GenAI applications, you can't just be enough with one model. Someone of you who have already started doing it, you know that very well. So here we have integrated with multiple vendors, and you can build a full-blown GenAI application using multiple models. Again, all of that in one IDE with one API. Okay, all these can be accessed through one single API. Basically when I say build and publish a generative AI application, we are talking about various stages in that life cycle, from exploring to experimenting, comparing, so on and so forth. So all of this can be done in the Unified Studio, Bedrock Unified Studio. Okay, so you don't, again, if you want to build a generative AI application, you don't have to come out of SageMaker Unified Studio. You can still be there. So all your data, your data engineering, data, and all the data workers, data engineers, data scientists, data analysts, and GenAI application developers can do everything end to end in a lakehouse, on a lakehouse, using Unified Studio with a unified data governance, with the new SageMaker this thing. Okay, so what do you pay? The beauty is that the entire thing what I just now explained about Unified Studio is free of cost. So there's no licensing cost for using the Unified Studio. However, whenever you are invoking a Redshift compute or any of these services inside Unified Studio, you'll be charged for that. So that's it from my side. I think sorry, we just have about 2 minutes left, but yeah, open for any questions or anything.
Thanks, Ravi. Thank you so much for going through it. And I think, as you rightly mentioned, I think you already opened up our surprises for our audience about saying that we'll have a detailed sessions. I was about to announce it at the end, but never mind. That's all good. So, as Ravi mentioned, we are already working with AWS to bring hands-on labs around SageMaker because there is a lot to learn. This is just the beginning of that entire series. What just Ravi talk about. There's a lot to learn, lot to work on that one. So we'll have hands-on sessions, two hands-on labs, virtual labs, what we are going to have it in our upcoming weeks. So please subscribe to our data channel if you have not done, so you don't miss out the information. Again, I know Ravi have given a wonderful session and have talked about his experience working with customers. Uh, but again, if you have any questions for Ravi or for me, please put it in the chat, in the comment section. And again, if you're watching this video on demand mode, please don't hesitate. Put the question in the comment section. I'll pass on that to Ravi, and we'll make sure that we answer all of your questions. So we'll wait for a few minutes. We're almost on the time. We'll wait for a few minutes. If there are no questions, then we'll move ahead, or else Ravi will answer all of this question. So please post your question in the chat.
Yeah, it can be anything. You don't have to think. See, whenever in this kind of scenarios, there are two things that will happen. Either you will learn or I'll learn. It's not necessary that I have all the answers, but if I have, nothing like it. But if I don't have, perfectly fine. Yeah. Or if you want to come on video or something, you can even do that. If you don't want to drop in a chat, that's also fine.
Yeah, I think we can just wait for a minute or so, Ravi, because I think there's some lag in the streaming. So I can think of like we should have it like in a
Yeah.
minute or two.
Usually, we should just wait for the first person to open up. Then everybody will open up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I can ask you. Let me be that first person, right, for our audience. Um,
Yeah.
where do you see this is going? I mean, I know 2024 reInvent has been outstanding. A lot of announcement and innovations out there, right? because the nature, right? The nature, the way the industry was moving because of generative AI and a lot of stuff, right? But specifically, I was more interested about this data and AI, right? How the AWS and other data partners in trying to bring together both the personas to bring a lot of innovations, right? And make data speak. Where do you see the next move going, according to you, as your personal opinion? I know you cannot talk about the roadmap, but again, where do you see personally things moving this year in terms of SageMaker, Gen AI, right?
Definitely. See, I think, where I see this go is that uh, agentic AI is everybody wants to catch the bus. Nobody wants to miss the bus. So you will hear a lot about agentic AI. Now, building those agents and making those agents run, building the MCP servers, having this. So we are in that the wave of when SaaS has come. It's like everybody went crazy after. The SaaSification is the term, right? So now agentification is the term. So where I'm seeing this going is that, that's the reason why we have recently in New York Summit, usually in Summit, by the way, we don't announce any, new products or anything like that. But the rate at which things are changing is so fast that we have made this announcement of Agent Core in Bedrock, building of agents in Bedrock. So not just, we're talking about, building generative AI applications in Bedrock, but also building agents in Bedrock. So that is where I see things are going. Yeah. Okay, we have a question here. How does SageMaker make sure other data problems are so some specific problems related to ML? Okay, yeah, you should actually look at SageMaker AI. So I don't know, Taranum Hassan. If you are working in SageMaker AI, you have the observability feature where you can actually monitor the data drift of a model. So that's yeah, that's the answer. Anyone else?
Also, I think one interesting question, I think we do see more questions coming out. How exactly would you see the new agentic ID that has been launched by Amazon, right? Kiro. Kiro working
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Unified Studio, because I mean, one is the Unified Studio, which is giving more of UI and fancy UI, making trying to simplify it, and another way we have this agentic ID, right? So how Kiro
Yeah, yeah.
integrates?
I'll tell you one thing. Kiro is just one of many. Okay, and there are going to be even more that is going to come, and this space will be flooded. Okay, this space will be, so there will be no dearth of tools. Okay, so that will be there, and it's very difficult to separate between which tool is better. Should I use Lovable? Should I use Cursor? Should I use Kiro? So it will become very difficult. But what I would want to highlight is that I think the audience here, this is a bit of a this thing for the audience as well. Think about a real problem that you want to solve. Okay, so today, with vibe coding coming in and all that, I see, there is more noise than signal. Okay, so the noise to signal ratio is very, very high. So today we don't really see, okay, I'll use Kiro, fine, Kiro is there, but what problem I'm going to solve? And Kiro is only means to an end, right? Or for that matter, Cursor is only means to an end. So am I going to solve the problem of productivity by what I'm going to solve? By what percentage am I going to solve this productivity? So that looking at the big picture, nobody's doing. All are doing like, okay, there's a new tool, there's a new shiny tool in the market. Let me use that. Let me do something out of it. But what are you doing it? What are you doing? Are we at a stage where we have hit the pinnacle of leveraging this technologies? We are not even solving some real hard problems today. Generative AI, maximum people they talk about chatbot, but no, chatbot is just the first step. But through generative AI, one can actually build. I was actually talking to one of a it's a tire manufacturing company, and very very forward looking, future looking CDO. He was saying that, Ravi, I want to use generative AI as a as imagine like this on the assembly line. If something fails, okay, what is going to fail? We have predictive analytics in place already, okay. But in case it fails, what should the on job, on duty plant manager or supervisor has to do? I want a video to come up, or a notification to come up on WhatsApp, and that video has to show me. It could be a 2D video, it could be an animation that has to show me that these are the 3 4 things that I have to do, okay, so that immediately I can fix the problem. So here is a classic use case of a real production level generative AI application, which is beyond your chatbot. But I think we all have that responsibility to think about that big problem. What big problem are we going to solve? What is the impact that we are going to create through these tools? So I think, I mean, my answer is very long, but yeah, that's where I see. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. So I think that's pretty much, Ravi. I don't see any further question from our audience, and we are almost on the time. So once again, thank you so much, Ravi, for spending a weekend with us and going through it. Absolutely, we'll stay in touch to have more detailed sessions. And thank you to the audience. And again, I'll pardon again. Please subscribe to our data channel. We'll have a lot more in upcoming weeks, and I don't want you to miss the information. So do subscribe either Meetup, YouTube, LinkedIn, or WhatsApp groups. Please do subscribe, and if you're watching in on-demand mode and you want to ask question anything to Ravi, don't hesitate that. So with that, we'll take a leave. Stay tuned for the next session. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.